The midday sun was scorching hot on the stones of the Sierra du Cascavel trail when Thomas McKenzie guided his white horse, Tempest, through the rugged rocks. At 42 years old, Thomas was a man marked by the hard life of the American West of 1850. His thick blonde beard covered a sun-weathered face, and under his wide-brimmed hat, his blue eyes maintained that constant vigilance of someone who had learned to trust animals more than men. He had departed at dawn from his ranch, isolated 3 days' ride from the nearest town, Copper Springs. Solitude had never bothered him. On the contrary, it was the price he gladly paid for the peace he found raising cattle and horses on his land, far from the complications that other men brought. The wind blew strong that afternoon, carrying the scent of pine trees and dry earth. Thomas was lost in thoughts about the horses he needed to break when a sound cut through the mountain, silence faint, almost imperceptible, but unmistakable to his trained ears. A cry for help. Thomas pulled the reins, bringing Tempest to an abrupt stop. He tilted his head, sharpening his ears. The cry came again, this time clearer, more desperate. A female voice. Follow the channel and leave in the comments which city you're watching from. Without hesitation, he guided the horse toward the sound, dodging thorny bushes and loose rocks. The trail narrowed dangerously at the edge of a gorge when he saw her. At the bottom of a rocky crevice, about 15 feet below trail level, a woman was waving desperately. Even from afar, Thomas recognized the worked leather dress and long black braids. She was an Indian woman. "Help, please," she shouted upon seeing him, her voice echoing among the rocks. Thomas dismounted quickly, assessing the situation. The crevice had steep, smooth walls, impossible to climb without help. The woman must have been at least 25 years old, and even covered in dust with her face marked by panic. She possessed a beauty that made him swallow hard. "Hold on tight," he shouted back, grabbing the lasso rope he always carried tied to Tempest's saddle. With precise and experienced movements, Thomas tied one end of the rope to a sturdy pine trunk near the edge, and tested the firmness of the knot. He threw the other end into the crevice. "Hold on tight, I'll pull you up." The Indian woman grabbed the rope with surprising determination. Thomas planted his feet on the rocky ground and began to pull, his muscles tensing under his linen shirt. She was light, but the height made the rescue challenging. Inch by inch, he hoisted her up until finally her hands reached the edge, and Thomas could grab her by the arms, pulling her to the safety of the trail. Both fell sitting on the ground, panting. Thomas quickly moved away, maintaining a respectful distance while catching his breath. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his rough voice carrying genuine concern. She shook her head, wiping the dust from her face with trembling hands. "No, just scared. I was gathering medicinal herbs when the edge gave way beneath my feet." She raised her dark eyes to him, and Thomas felt something strange tighten in his chest. "You saved my life. How can I thank you?" "You don't need to thank me. Any decent man would do the same." He stood up, extending his hand to help her. When their fingers touched, an electric current seemed to pass between them. Thomas released her hand quickly, as if he had touched hot iron. "What's your name?" "Kaya," she answered softly, the name meaning wisdom in her language. "And you?" "Thomas McKenzie. I have a ranch downriver following the valley." An awkward silence settled between them. Kaya looked at Thomas with a mixture of gratitude and something more curiosity that mirrored what he himself felt. The wind played with her long braids, and the sunlight created golden reflections on her brown skin. Thomas cleared his throat, uncomfortable with the direction of his thoughts. "Is your village far from here?" Thomas was a man marked by the hard life of the American West of 1850. His thick blonde beard covered a sun-weathered face, and under his wide-brimmed hat, his blue eyes maintained that constant vigilance. The pasture was only 15 minutes' ride away, but it seemed like an eternity with the storm falling upon him like a biblical deluge. The rain was so intense that Thomas could barely see a few meters ahead. His hat weighed on his head, soaked in seconds. When he finally reached the pasture, his heart raced. The river, normally calm and shallow at that time of year, had already overflowed its banks. The water was rising rapidly, a furious brown sea, carrying branches and debris. Zeus was near the fence bordering the river, his eyes wide with terror, neighing loudly. The water already reached his hocks. "Zeus here, boy," Thomas shouted against the deafening noise of the storm. But the horse, paralyzed by fear, didn't move. Thomas had no choice. He dismounted from Tempest and tied his reins to a tree on higher ground, then advanced on foot into the rising water. The river pulled at his legs with frightening force. The current was treacherous, laden with mud and debris. Thomas fought against the water, each step a battle, until he reached Zeus. He grabbed the horse's reins and pulled with all his might. "Come on, boy, you need to trust me." Perhaps it was the desperation in Thomas's voice, or perhaps some survival instinct finally overcame the panic, but Zeus began to move. Together, man and horse fought against the deadly current, each inch one costing a Herculean effort. When they finally reached safe ground, both collapsed, panting. Thomas hugged Zeus's wet neck, silently thanking that both were alive, but he had no time to rest. He mounted Tempest, took Zeus by the reins, and galloped back to the ranch. the storm roaring around him like a maddened beast. The same storm that Thomas had faced reached Kaya's village with even greater fury. The river that ran gently beside their tents transformed into a hungry monster. Kaya was in the corn plantation on the mountain slopes with the other women when the rain began. It was tradition for the women to care for the plantation while the men hunted and fished. That day, about 50 women and some small children were harvesting ripe ears when the sky fell. "Quick, to the big rock," shouted Kaya's grandmother, pointing to a rock formation that created a natural shelter on the slope. The women ran, carrying the children, and huddled under the protective rock while the storm unleashed its fury. From up there, they had a partial view of the village below. That's when Kaya saw it. The river had transformed into a brown tsunami, a wall of water and destruction that swept the village as if it were made of straw. The tents disappeared in seconds, and the men of the village, from the elders to the youngest warriors, were dragged by the relentless current before they could react. The women's screams mixed with the storm's roar. Kaya pressed her hands against her mouth, tears mixing with rain on her face. Her father, her uncles, her younger brother all disappeared in the fury of the waters in a matter of seconds. The storm lasted 3 hours that seemed like 3 days. When it finally passed, the silence that followed was more frightening than the previous noise. The women descended from the mountain in a silent, shocked group. What they found was total devastation. The village had been completely swept away. Remnants of tents, utensils, and belongings were scattered downriver, and of the men, no sign. 53 women and 7 children. That was all that remained of the tribe. Kaya's grandmother, the oldest woman and now the de facto leader of the group, gathered everyone in a circle. "Our losses are immense," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "But we need to survive. For our children, for our dead, for our tribe. We will rebuild. But how?" The women looked at each other, despair evident on every face. Without men to hunt, to protect, to build, how would they survive the approaching winter? Thomas was a man marked by the hard life of the American West of 1850. His thick blonde beard covered a sun-weathered face, and under his wide-brimmed hat, his blue eyes maintained that constant vigilance. 3 days after the storm, Thomas finally managed to assess the damage to his ranch. He had been lucky only some destroyed fences and about a dozen escaped cattle. Nothing that couldn't be fixed with time and hard work. On the clear morning that followed, he saddled Tempest and set out to track the lost cattle. The tracks were easy to follow in the still fresh mud, leading him northward, toward the hills near the river. He was following the trail through a pine grove when he heard the crack of branches behind him. Before he could react, figures emerged from the trees. Women, at least 8 of them, armed with bows and spears. Indian women. Thomas slowly raised his hands, showing he wasn't armed. His rifle was on the saddle, but making any sudden movement would be suicide. "I didn't come to cause trouble," he said calmly. "Just looking for my cattle." One of the women, older than the others, with graying hair and a hard look, spoke in broken English. "You come with us." Now it wasn't a request, it was an order. Thomas considered his options. There were many of them, and he was alone. He could try to fight or flee, but that would probably result in his death. Besides, something in that woman's look wasn't pure hostility, it was desperation disguised as determination. "All right," he agreed, dismounting from Tempest. "I'll go with you." They tied his hands loosely. He noted, almost as if they didn't really want to hurt him, and led him through the forest. They also took Tempest, who followed docilely. After an hour of walking, they arrived at what remained of the village. Thomas swallowed hard upon seeing the devastation. Temporary tents made of branches and leaves had been erected in the higher areas, away from the river. Women worked silently, some caring for small children, others trying to salvage belongings from the mud. There wasn't a single man in sight. They took Thomas to the center of the provisional camp and tied him to the thick trunk of a fallen tree. The women gathered in a circle around him, and that's when he fully understood his situation. They didn't want to kill him. They wanted something very different. "Storm took all our men," explained the elder, the same one who had captured him. "Only women remain. And children. Without men, tribe dies. Winter comes. We need hunter. We need protector." She paused, her gaze hardening. "We need man for children." Thomas felt the blood drain from his face as he understood the implication. He looked around the circle of women, some young, others older, all looking at him with a mixture of desperation and hope. "Ladies, he began, but didn't know how to finish. That's when he saw Kaya. She was at the back of the group, almost hidden behind other women. Their eyes met, and Thomas saw the same shock and horror reflected in them that he himself felt. She shook her head slightly, a silent plea he didn't immediately understand. The women began discussing among themselves in their own language, apparently deciding who would have the privilege of staying with the prisoner first. Some voices rose, others argued. Thomas realized this could easily turn into a conflict. "Wait," his voice thundered, silencing the discussions. Everyone turned to him. "I won't fight against you. I can see you've been through something terrible, and I'm truly sorry for that." He chose his words carefully. "But this isn't right. Forcing someone, whether man or woman, is never right." The elder frowned. "You don't want to help. I want to help." Thomas said honestly. I can teach your women to hunt better. I can help rebuild. I can even bring supplies from my ranch, but not like this. Not as a prisoner. A murmur ran through the group. Some women seemed to consider his words. Others seemed suspicious. That's when Kaya stepped forward. On the riverbank, to the north, Kaya pointed in the opposite direction from where Thomas was heading. He nodded, collecting his rope and coiling it carefully. Part of him wanted to offer shelter, to ensure she arrived safely. But he knew well the tensions between white settlers and native tribes. The Indians would not look kindly upon one of theirs, taking one of their women to his ranch, even with the best intentions. "Can you make it alone?" he asked, already knowing the answer, but unable to leave without being sure. "Yes, I know every stone of these mountains." Kaya took a step toward him, her penetrating eyes fixed on his. "Thomas McKenzie, you are different from the other white men I have met. Your heart is good. The spirits will protect you." Before he could respond, she turned and began descending the trail with the natural grace of someone born in those lands. Thomas stood watching until her figure disappeared among the trees, a strange knot in his throat. He mounted Tempest and continued his journey, but something had changed. For the first time in years, the silence of the mountains didn't seem so welcoming. His thoughts kept returning to those dark eyes, to the sound of that voice, to the brief touch of their hands. The weeks that followed were the most restless Thomas had experienced in a long time. His days followed the same routine as always, waking before dawn, caring for the horses, checking the fences, branding the cattle, but his mind insisted on wandering to places where it shouldn't. Kaya, he found himself thinking about her at the most inopportune moments, while shoeing a horse, while fixing a broken gate, while sitting alone for dinner by candlelight in the wooden house he had built with his own hands. Her face appeared in his thoughts like a stubborn apparition, and Thomas reprimanded himself for it. "It's just gratitude for having saved the woman," he murmured to himself while brushing Tempest in the stable. Nothing more, but it was more, and he knew it. What Thomas couldn't know was that just 6 miles away, in the village on the riverbank, Kaya was going through the same trials. While braiding baskets with the other women, while grinding corn to make bread, while helping her grandmother prepare medicines. With the herbs she had gathered in all these moments, her thoughts returned to the white man with the blonde beard and kind eyes. She had told her grandmother about the rescue, but omitted the details about what she felt when looking into Thomas's eyes. About the warmth that coursed through her body when he touched her hand. Her grandmother, wise as she was, had perceived what had not been said and only shook her head sadly. "Some paths should not be followed, my granddaughter," said the elder. No matter how much the heart calls, Kaya knew her grandmother was right. Her people and the white men lived in precarious peace, a peace that could shatter at the slightest sign of transgression. A romance between her and Thomas would be seen as betrayal by both sides. Still, she couldn't erase his memory. It was at the end of August, when the sky began to darken with the fury, that Thomas immediately recognized. Heavy black clouds accumulated on the western horizon, advancing like an implacable army. The wind had changed direction, bringing the unmistakable smell of torrential rain. "Big storm coming," Thomas murmured, watching the sky from his house's porch. Distant thunder echoed among the mountains like war drums. He had only minutes to act. He ran to the stable, releasing the confined horses and leading them to the main barn, more protected. But there was a problem. Zeus, his most valuable and also most stubborn stallion, was in the east pasture, near the river. The first drops began to fall when Thomas hastily saddled Tempest and departed at a gallop. The wind howled now, bending the trees and tearing leaves from branches. Lightning cut through the sky with growing fury. "Grandmother," she said respectfully, addressing the elder. "This is the man who saved me from the crevice in the rocks. He was right not to trust taking me to his ranch at that time, and now we've proven that his distrust was justified by capturing him like this." She looked directly at Thomas, her eyes shining with intense emotion. "If we force this man, we'll be as bad as those who forced us from our ancestral lands." Kaya's grandmother studied her granddaughter, then Thomas, then her granddaughter again. Something unspoken passed between the man, understanding that came from years of living together. "You speak with wisdom beyond your years, Kaya," the elder finally said. She turned to Thomas. "We will untie you, but you cannot leave yet. We need to discuss how you can help. If you truly want to help, I will help," Thomas promised. "I give you my word." They released his hands, and Thomas rubbed his wrists, circulating sensation back into them. The women dispersed, returning to their tasks, but looking at him from time to time, with mixed curiosity and distrust. Kaya approached after the others moved away. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "They're desperate. They lost everything." "I know, and I truly want to help." Thomas looked into her eyes. "But seeing you, I didn't expect it. I thought maybe I'd never." "I thought about you too," Kaya interrupted, her cheeks flushing. "Every day since we met. I tried not to think, but you couldn't." Thomas completed, "Neither could I." They stood there, a few steps apart, the world continuing around them but seeming suspended just for the two of them. It was Kaya who finally broke the silence. "This is impossible, you know," she said, her voice laden with sadness. "My people, your people, would never accept it. Maybe, Thomas agreed. But sometimes the impossible is just the difficult in disguise. Thomas stayed at the women's camp for 3 days, and in that time, he proved his worth repeatedly. He taught the younger women to use traps for small game, helped rebuild sturdier shelters, and even managed to kill a deer that fed the entire tribe for 2 days. But it was his interaction with Kaya that really mattered. They found ways to be Alonso's stolen moments when she took him to show where to find dry firewood, or when they worked together, reinforcing tent walls. They talked about everything and nothing, discovering surprising affinities despite their very different worlds. When I was a child, Kaya told while they braided branches to make walls. I used to sit on the riverbank and imagine what the world beyond the mountains was like. My father said I had an explorer's heart. And you never explored? Thomas asked. Women of my tribe don't explore. We stay, we care, we preserve. She looked at him, a rebellious gleam in her eyes. But I always wanted to. Thomas smiled. Maybe someday you can. Maybe, she echoed. But both knew she was talking about more than simply exploring. On the third night, Kaya's grandmother invited Thomas to sit beside the bonfire with the remaining elders. The moon shone high and full, casting silver shadows over the camp. Thomas McKenzie, the elder, began, "You have proven to be a man of honor. You helped without asking for anything in return. That is rare." She paused, studying him with eyes that seemed to see through his soul. "But I see how you look at my granddaughter. And I see how she looks at you." Thomas felt his stomach tighten. "With all due respect, ma'am," she raised her hand, silencing him. "I don't deny that this worries me. A romance between you two would bring trouble to both sides. But," she sighed heavily, "I also see that the paths of the heart rarely follow the logic of the head. And these are extraordinary times that call for extraordinary decisions." "What are you saying?" Thomas asked, cautiously. "I'm saying I won't stand in your way, but I also can't openly give my blessing. If you choose this path, it will be a difficult path, full of judgment and danger." Her eyes softened. "Kaya is my only granddaughter. I want her happiness above all, even if it means losing her." Thomas didn't know what to say. He nodded respectfully, feeling the weight of the trust being placed in him. That night, after everyone slept, Kaya found him at the edge of the camp, where he was checking on Tempest. "My grandmother told me what she said," Kaya whispered. "And what do you think about it?" Thomas asked. She took a step closer. "I think I'm afraid. I think this is madness. I think it will be harder than anything we've ever faced." She raised her hand and gently touched his face, her fingers tracing the outline of his beard. "And I think I do and care about any of that if I can be with you." Thomas covered her hand with his. "Kaya, but not yet," she said quickly, pulling away. "My people need me now. I need to help them survive the winter, help them get back on their feet. I can't just leave and abandon them." "I know," Thomas agreed, "and I wouldn't ask that of you. But I can wait, and I can help." They stood there under the moonlight, close but not touching, knowing that anything more would be precipitous. But the promise was there, suspended between them like something tangible. Thomas returned to his ranch the next day, but now there was a new purpose in his life. Every week, he made the trip to the women's camp, bringing supplies, dried meat, blankets, tools. He taught them more hunting and survival techniques, helped build better shelters for the approaching winter. But everyone knew his gaze sought only one person. Kaya flourished under his attention. She had become one of the de facto leaders of the devastated tribe, her intelligence and determination helping to keep the women united and focused on survival. But when Thomas arrived, her eyes shone with a special light. Winter came early and severe that year. Snow fell heavily, transforming the world into a white and merciless desert. Thomas reduced his visits. The trails became impassable for days after each snowfall, but when he could go, he always brought something vital: medicines, food, news from the outside world. It was during one of these visits, in the middle of January, that everything changed. Thomas had just arrived at the camp, shaking snow from his coat, when he heard alarm cries. Women ran toward the edge of the camp, where the forest met the clearing. "Wolves!" someone shouted. "A huge pack!" Thomas grabbed a spear and ran Kaya right behind him. At the camp's edge, he saw a pack of at least a dozen wolves, their yellow eyes glowing in the snow's light. Slowly approaching, they were thin, desperate with winter hunger, willing to risk attacking humans. The women had formed a defensive line with spears and torches, but Thomas could see the fear in their faces. Without men to fight, they were in grave danger. "Back away slowly," Thomas instructed in a low voice, keeping his rifle raised. "Don't run, don't show fear." But then one of the small children, frightened, screamed and ran. It was the trigger the wolves needed. The pack leader advanced. Thomas didn't think, just acted. He grabbed the spear with a torch and threw it near them, and they fled. Kaya was at his side now, her spear in attack position. "Together," she said simply. They faced the pack, side by side, Thomas and Kaya, with her spear and fierce courage. The other women joined them, forming a human wall between the predators and the children. The battle lasted only minutes, but seemed like hours. When it finally ended, they had fled back to the forest. Thomas and Kaya were covered in blood, none of it theirs, panting and trembling with adrenaline. And then, right there, in front of the entire tribe, Kaya turned and kissed Thomas. It was a desperate kiss, full of fear and relief and something much deeper. Thomas embraced her, forgetting where they were, forgetting everything except the taste of her lips and the absolute certainty that he wanted to spend the rest of his life protecting this woman. When they finally separated, the silence in the camp was deafening. All the women watched them, and Thomas expected judgment, condemnation. Instead, Kaya's grandmother stepped forward and smiled, the first time Thomas had seen her truly smile. "It seems the spirits have already decided," she said simply. "Who are we to argue?" Spring came slowly, melting the snow and bringing life back to the earth. The tribeswomen had survived the winter largely thanks to Thomas's help. But survival wasn't enough. They needed a future. It was on an April night, with the first flowers blooming in the hills, that Kaya's grandmother called a tribal meeting. All the women gathered around the large bonfire, the children sleeping in nearby tents. "We face a choice," the elder began, her voice carrying the weight of her responsibilities. "We can try to continue alone, only women, or we can seek union with other tribes. Or," she looked directly at Kaya, "we can accept that some of us will choose different paths." Kaya stood up, her heart beating fast. "Grandmother, if you permit me to speak." The elder nodded. "I love this man, Thomas McKenzie," Kaya said, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. "I know this frightens many of you. It frightens me too. But he has repeatedly proven that his heart is good, that he respects our people, that he's willing to help without asking for anything in return." She looked around the circle of faces. "If I go with him, I won't be abandoning you. I'll be building a bridge between two worlds." One of the younger women, Kimimela, stood up. "And if more of us want that bridge, if we want to live in peace with the whites instead of in constant fear," this sparked a heated debate. Some women were against any association with white settlers, citing years of broken promises and stolen lands. Others saw in this an opportunity for survival and perhaps even prosperity. The grandmother let the debate flow for hours, listening to all sides. Finally, when it was late, she spoke again. "We will do this. Those who wish to try union with other tribes, we will help make that journey. Those who wish to stay here and rebuild our village will stay. And those who wish to find their own paths, like Kaya, will have our blessing." She looked at her granddaughter with tears in her eyes. Life is about choices, and in times of great change, we need to have courage to make difficult choices. 3 days later, Thomas was at his ranch when he heard the sound of horses approaching. He stepped out onto the porch, but relaxed upon seeing Kaya mounted on one of the horses he had given to the tribe. She dismounted with the grace he so admired, but her face was tense with concern. "Thomas, we need to talk." He led her inside the house, the first time she had entered. Kaya looked around the simple but well-kept space, the wooden table Thomas had made, the fireplace where he cooked his solitary meals, the rocking chair where he spent evenings reading the few books he owned. "How long have you lived alone?" she asked. 15 years, Thomas answered. "Since my wife passed away from fever, I never thought that." He stopped, swallowing hard. "I never thought I'd feel something like this again." Kaya turned to him, and Thomas saw tears in her eyes. "My grandmother gave her blessing. The tribe accepted my choice. But Thomas," she took a deep breath, "if I come live with you, some of the white men from town may not accept it. And there may be members of other tribes who will see this as betrayal." "I know," Thomas said, taking her hands in his. "It won't be easy, but Kaya, I built this ranch with my own hands. I survived brutal winters, bear attacks, loneliness. I can face the judgment of other people if it means waking up every day beside you." "But what about when we go to town?" she insisted. "When we need supplies, help." Thomas thought for a moment. "Then we'll be smart. I know some men in Copper Springs who are open-minded. Reverend Patterson, Dr. Hutchinson. We'll make friends slowly. Prove we're just a couple trying to live in peace." He caressed her face. "And if the town doesn't accept us, there are other places. The territory is large. We'll find our place." Kaya closed her eyes, finally allowing herself to believe this could work. When she whispered, "Whenever you're ready," Thomas answered. "Tomorrow, next week, next month. I'll wait as long as necessary." She opened her eyes and smiled, a smile that illuminated her entire face. "Then tomorrow, I don't want to wait another day." But fate had other plans. That same night, as Kaya rode back to the camp, she noticed something strange. Smoke, not the normal smoke from cooking fires, but thick black smoke rising in heavy columns. Her heart raced. She galloped her horse down the familiar trail with fear growing with each beat of hooves. When she arrived at the camp, she found chaos. Warriors from a rival tribe, the Crow, ancient enemies of her people, were attacking. Taking advantage of the vulnerability of a camp formed only by women, they came to steal supplies, horses, and perhaps even kidnap women for slavery. "Kaya, run!" her grandmother shouted upon seeing her. "Flee!" But Kaya couldn't flee. She saw Kimimela being dragged by a Crow warrior, saw tents on fire, heard the screams of terrified children. She had only seconds to make a decision. Kaya pulled the horse around and galloped back in the direction she had come from, faster than she had ever galloped in her life. Tears ran down her face, but her jaw was set with determination. Thomas. She needed Thomas. Thomas was about to go to bed when he heard the desperate sound of galloping hooves. He ran outside, finding Kaya practically falling from her horse in front of his house. Thomas, attack, Crow warriors, my people, she managed to say between sobs. Thomas wasted no time with questions. How many? Maybe more. 20 warriors against him alone were impossible odds. But Thomas looked into Kaya's desperate eyes and knew he had no choice. Get all the extra spears and bows and arrows I have, he ordered, already running to saddle Tempest and Zeus. 5 minutes later, they were galloping together through the night, 2 horses flying over the earth like ghosts, carrying impossible hope. They could see the flames before they even reached the camp. Thomas felt a tightness in his chest. Maybe it was already too late. But when they arrived at the clearing's edge, they saw that the women were fighting, armed with spears, knives, and desperate courage. They had formed a defensive circle around the children, resisting against the Crow warriors. Thomas dismounted in motion. Kaya, stay here and provide cover fire. No, I'm going with you, she shouted. There was no time to argue. They advanced together into the chaos of battle. Thomas took down a warrior who was about to attack Kaya's grandmother with a spear. The second dispersed a group surrounding 3 women, but there were many, and he was reloading when a warrior turned toward him. Axe raised, Kaya interposed herself, her spear meeting the attacker's chest. She screamed a war cry that echoed through the clearing, and the other women responded with their own cries. Thomas fought side by side with Kaya, their movements synchronized as if they had trained together for years. He threw spears with fire tips that he lit in a bonfire. The Crow leader, realizing the attack had become too costly, finally shouted a retreat order. The warriors who could still walk carried their wounded and fled to the forest. When silence finally fell over the camp, the price of victory became clear. For women were dead, many others wounded. Half the camp was on fire, but they had survived. Kaya turned to Thomas, both covered in blood and soot, and fell into his arms. You came back, she sobbed. You risked your life for my people, for our people. Thomas corrected gently, holding her tightly. Kaya's grandmother approached, limping from a leg wound. She looked at Thomas with newfound respect. You fought as if they were your own people, she said. You saved many lives tonight, and I would do it again, Thomas replied simply. The elder nodded slowly. Kaya, you chose well. She touched her granddaughter's face tenderly. Go with him. Go now, tonight. The Crow may return with more warriors. You'll be safer at his ranch. But grandmother, I can't leave you. You can, and you will, the elder said firmly. Your life is with this man now. And she smiled through her tears. Maybe one day you'll bring me a great-grandchild to meet. Thomas and Kaya rode through the night, leaving behind the devastated camp. The grandmother had promised to take the remaining women to join a friendly tribe further north, where they would be safe. When they arrived at the ranch at dawn, the rising sun painted the sky pink and gold. Thomas helped Kaya dismount, and for a moment they just stood there, holding hands, barely believing they were finally together. Welcome to your home, Thomas said softly. Kaya looked around, at the simple wooden house, at the well-maintained barns, at the majestic mountains all around, and felt a peace she had never experienced before. Home, she repeated, testing the word. Then she smiled. Yes, home. The months that followed weren't easy. When Thomas finally took Kaya to Copper Springs, they faced disapproving looks and whispers. But Reverend Patterson, true to his word, received them warmly and even performed a Christian wedding ceremony for them, although they also respected Kaya's tribe's wedding rituals, conducted by her grandmother on a later visit. Dr. Hutchinson and his wife became close friends, as did some other more progressive families. Slowly, Thomas and Kaya built a life not without challenges, but with enough love to overcome every obstacle. Kaya learned Thomas's cattle-raising techniques, and he learned about medicinal plants and reading nature from her. Together, they made the ranch more prosperous than Thomas had ever managed alone. And then, a year and a half after their flight, that fateful night, came the news that would change everything again. It was an autumn morning, with tree leaves shining in shades of gold and red, when Kaya woke up, feeling different. She knew her body well enough to recognize the signs. Thomas, she whispered, gently shaking him. He woke immediately. Old habits of vigilance never completely died. What is it? Is everything all right? I'm pregnant, Kaya said simply, watching his face. Thomas was completely still for a moment, processing the words. Then a huge smile spread across his face, a smile so wide it made his cheeks hurt. Pregnant, are you sure? I'm sure, she confirmed, laughing at his joy. We're going to have a baby. Thomas picked her up in his arms and spun her around the house, both laughing like children. When he finally put her down, he knelt and placed his hands gently on her still flat belly. Hi, little one, he whispered. Your father is eager to meet you. The months of pregnancy were simultaneously the most frightening and most beautiful of their lives. Kaya had moments of fear. What if the child wasn't accepted by either world? What if they faced dangers she couldn't foresee? But Thomas was always there, solid as rock, reminding her that love was stronger than hate. That courage overcame fear. Kaya's grandmother came to stay with them in the last month of pregnancy, bringing traditional medicines and ancient wisdom. She also brought news: the tribe had successfully settled on new lands, and some of the younger women had found husbands among allied tribes. Life continues, the elder said philosophically. We lost much, but we also gained new things. That's how it has always been. It was on a spring night, with cherry blossoms blooming in the fields, that labor began. Kaya's grandmother and Mrs. Hutchinson, who had become a dear friend, helped with the delivery. Thomas spent those longest hours of his life pacing back and forth on the porch, praying to gods he wasn't sure he believed in, making promises he intended to keep forever. When he finally heard a baby's cry, his legs almost gave way with relief. Mrs. Hutchinson came out, smiling broadly. You have a son, Thomas, a strong, healthy boy, and Kaya is fine. Thomas ran inside, finding Kaya reclining on pillows, exhausted but radiant, holding a small bundle in her arms. When he approached, she opened the blanket to reveal a perfect baby with honey-colored skin and a small tuft of blonde hair. He has your eyes, Kaya whispered. And your nose, Thomas replied, marveling. He gently touched the baby's cheek with one finger, feeling tears in his own eyes. He's perfect. What will we call him? Kaya asked. Thomas thought for a moment. In your language, what's the name for New Hope? Kaya's grandmother, watching from the corner of the room, answered, Aponi. It means butterfly, but also represents transformation and new life. And how about a name for my world too? Thomas suggested. So he belongs to both. James, Kaya said, smiling. That was your father's name, wasn't it? Thomas nodded, too emotional to speak. Then he'll be James Aponi, Mackenzie, Kaya declared, son of two worlds, bridged between two peoples. The baby chose that moment to open his eyes, bright blue eyes, like Thomas's, and make a small sound that could have been a laugh. 10 years later, the Mackenzie Ranch had become something of legend in the territory. It wasn't just a successful ranch, raising some of the best horses and cattle in the region. It was also a place where Native Americans and white settlers sometimes met on neutral ground, where trade and even friendships were forged. James Aponi was now 10 years old, a boy with bright eyes and inexhaustible energy, who spoke both English and his mother's language fluently. He rode as if he'd been born in a saddle and shot with a bow and arrow, with accuracy that impressed even the most experienced warriors. But more importantly, he knew stories from both sides of his heritage. He knew the legends of his mother's people and the tales of the Old West from his father, and he was growing up without hatred, without prejudice, only with curiosity and respect for both cultures that flowed in his veins. This particular afternoon, Thomas and Kaya were sitting on the porch he had expanded over the years, watching James train with Zeus, now an older but still majestic horse. Do you regret it? Thomas asked suddenly, taking Kaya's hand. Regret what? She replied, knowing perfectly well what he was asking but wanting to hear him say it. Everything. Leaving your people, facing the judgments. Choosing this life with me. Kaya turned to look directly into his eyes, those blue eyes she had fallen in love with so many years ago on the mountain trail. Thomas McKenzie, since the day you saved me from that rocky crevice, my life has been an adventure. We've had sorrows and losses. Yes, we've faced prejudices and dangers. But we've also had joys I never dreamed were possible. She squeezed his hand. I don't regret a single day. Thomas pulled her close, kissing her forehead. Neither do I. They stayed there as the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky with the same shades of pink and gold as the first morning they spent together at that ranch. Down in the meadow, James galloped free, his laughter carried by the wind. And in that moment, everything was perfect. Their life hadn't been easy, never would be, in a time and place where their love was seen as impossible by so many. But they had proven that the impossible was just the difficult in disguise. They had built more than a ranch. They had built a family, a bridge between worlds, a legacy of hope. And as the sun plunged beyond the mountains, casting long shadows over the land they now called home, Thomas and Kaya knew a fundamental truth. True love knows no boundaries of race or culture. It simply exists, strong and eternal as the mountains around them, flowing free like the river that had almost separated them but ended up uniting them. The Whitewater Ranch would prosper for generations, a testament that when two people choose love over fear, when they choose courage over conformity, they can create something truly extraordinary. And so ends the story of Thomas and Kaya, but it's also just the beginning. For in James Aponi and the children he would one day have, the white waters of two cultures merged into a single river, strong and beautiful, running toward a future where, they hoped, love would finally be free to flourish without judgment. Follow the channel and leave in the comments which city you're watching.